Joining me now, Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, who sits on the Judiciary Committee and strongly opposed Kavanaugh's nomination. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Good
you
morning.
Heard Senator Susan Collins, your colleague, say she doesn't believe that now Justice Kavanaugh assaulted Ford.
Mm-hmm.
What's your reaction?
She said that she said that Dr. Ford thinks that she was assaulted, which is even more insulting than saying that she gave a very credible account. I certainly believe Dr. Ford. Anybody watching her testimony would know, I would say, would conclude that she was being very truthful. And the one thing that she recollects with 100% accuracy is that Judge Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh, assaulted her.
Do you think that Senator Collins is insulting to Professor Ford?
Well, to say that she thinks that Dr. Ford thinks that she was assaulted, what is that? Is she mistaken? She herself said that she's heard from so many survivors from her state and elsewhere. All of us have been hearing stories and accounts from survivors going back many, many years where they kept all these painful, traumatic accounts to themselves. And this is what happens with sexual assault survivors, that they do not come forward. I also note that in your interview that she kept saying that there was no corroboration. There was no corroboration on Brett Kavanaugh's bald assertion that he didn't do it, because the people that the FBI interviewed, which was just a small number of the dozens that they should have interviewed, they all said that they have no recollection. That is hardly what I would call exoneration, but on her side, there was corroboration because she had talked about this assault to her husband, to others, before Brett Kavanaugh was ever nominated to the Supreme Court. She took a lie detector test. Corroboration was there.
Senator, I want you to listen to what President Trump said when he was asked about how women are reacting to this confirmation.
The women, I feel, were in many ways stronger than the men in his favor, because they're thinking of their sons. They're thinking of their husbands and their brothers and their uncles and others. And women are, I think, extremely happy.
What about women who don't see this the way you do, see it differently?
Well, obviously, there are a lot of women who think that sexual assault is not a huge problem in our country, and that the way we deal with survivors of sexual assault is not a problem. They certainly have that view, but believe me, I have heard, and all of us have heard from literally thousands of survivors who have come forward to tell us their accounts, and this is a underreported crime. We know this. But so I am saddened when women themselves, who I'm sure they've all experienced sexual harassment, unwanted words said to us, all of that. It's all,
and they argue not that many of them I've talked to, probably you have too, and even Susan Collins said, not that the victims are making it up, but that you can't be sure that people who are accused of doing it should be presumed innocent.
This is not a court of law. I want to ask Susan Collins, if you were interviewing someone for a lifetime position to some company or some interest that you had, would you hire somebody with this kind of a cloud over their heads? This is for the United States Supreme Court. 9 people who are going to make decisions that impact all of our lives for life.
I want to ask you about the atmosphere. The president and Republicans, what they are saying is that Democratic protesters are, quote, an angry mob. And what I want to ask you about is, you know, it is one thing to protest at the Supreme Court, to do it at the Capitol. That's been done for generations,
yes,
and frankly, since the founding of this
yes,
country. It's another thing to run senators out of restaurants, go to their homes. Is that going too far?
I think that it just means that there are a lot of people who are very, very much motivated by what is going on. Because what happened with Judge Kavanaugh is, from the very beginning, this was not a fair process. What the Republicans did was to telegraph, after Dr. Ford's account came forward, what they telegraphed was, 1, Dr. Ford, we don't want to hear from you. 2, if we have to hear from you, we're going to rig the hearing so that
should the going after people at restaurants stop?
Well, this is what happens, you know, because when you look at white supremacists and all of that, this is what's coming forth in our country. There's a tremendous divisiveness in our country, but this is the kind of activism that occurs, and people make their own decisions. If they violate the law, then they have to account for that.
One last question. Some of your Democratic colleagues have been saying that the Democrats, your fellow Democrats' case against Justice Kavanaugh was weakened by Michael Avenatti, the lawyer representing a woman who claimed that Kavanaugh facilitated gang rape. Did he hurt your cause?
There were enough other aspects and allegations and reports that we wanted the FBI to investigate, and they did not. Why? Because the White House very much limited the scope of this so-called investigation, which was a sham.
Should Brett Kavanaugh be impeached if Democrats take control?
I'm much more focused on the here and now, which is that we have an election coming up, and I've said to the women who are justifiably angry but determined, and I said they should be just focused like a laser beam on the elections, because they have connected the dots. They know that the senators who are making these confirmation decisions are the people who were elected by their voters. And so as voters, they have a role to play.
Senator, thank you so much. Thank you for your time this morning.
Senator Mazie Hirono, a Democratic member of the Judiciary Committee who helped lead the opposition to Kavanaugh's nomination. So you good morning, you called this process a sham. He is now Justice Kavanaugh. Do you view Justice Brett Kavanaugh as a legitimate justice?
He's going to be on the Supreme Court with a huge taint and a big asterisk after his name. And the partisanship that he showed was astounding. And the conspiracy theory that he accused us of behaving in was bizarre. So prior to his testimony, I had already decided, having gone through his record and his dissents, that there was a pattern which showed that he was not for women's reproductive choice. That is sure. And a number of other patterns that were very troubling, and I had already decided. But with regard to this sham FBI investigation, everyone knows that when you just interview a small number of people and not the dozens of others who wanted to be interviewed by the FBI, that is a sham. And it raises more questions than it answers.
So even before the final vote on the confirmation, we heard from the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, the possible future chairman of that committee, say this about the confirmation process.
If he is on the Supreme Court and the Senate hasn't investigated, then the House will have to.
You'll investigate.
We would have to investigate any credible allegations, certainly of perjury and other things that haven't been properly looked into before.
Okay, so this confirmation battle is over. He is Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Do you really think that Democrats, should they win control of the House, should continue an investigation absent some new revelations?
The confirmation battle may be over, but the court packing is definitely not over. So the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, these two ultra-conservative organizations have spent decades preparing their people, like Judge Kavanaugh, for the Supreme Court and every other court for life. And in fact, just next week, we're going to hear from two more for the Sixth Circuit. These are potential nominees.
Do you want to continue an investigation?
Jerry Nadler will do what Jerry Nadler will do, but I'm totally focused with all the angry women and the men who listen to women and support the credible accounts of sexual harassment and sexual assault, which is very underreported, that I'm focused like a laser beam on the elections, because all these angry people out there, they know that it is the people who are sitting in the Senate that they've elected who are making these decisions, and they're going to go to the polls and they're going to vote differently. Can
you rule out this idea of impeaching Kavanaugh?
Well, it all starts with the House. So, you know, I view so many of these things as basically, John, I don't blame you for wanting to ask these questions, because I know as you tried to talk to Kellyanne, and it's really hard to get a word in edgewise with her. But this whole impeachment thing, you know what? I'm very focused on the here and now, which is that all of these very angry women, mainly out there, who saw what was going on and how the Senate was not able to deal fairly with the entire issue of sexual assault. Clearly, this idea that that Dr. Ford was given, you know, all accommodation is really, I have to say, baloney.
But you won't rule out impeachment. We've only had one justice.
Jerry Nadler is not ruling out impeachment, but
is that a mistake, though? I mean, did we really want, after we just went through all this,
I'm much more focused on what we need to do, which is we need to get to the polls, truly.
Okay, also, you heard Kellyanne raise the issue of the protests. I want to show you something Marco Rubio tweeted just a short while ago. Can you imagine what Democrats and many in media would be saying if it was conservatives ambushing them at restaurants, confronting them at home, disrupting Senate hearings and votes with primal screams, now literally banging on the door of the Supreme Court building? They would call it a mob. So let me ask you, you mentioned the anger. The anger is real, but are these tactics wise? Do you approve of these tactics?
The anger is real. There are a lot of people who feel very, very strongly. And the Republicans seem to forget what happened during the passage of the Affordable Care Act, where, believe me, the Democrats were the focus and the brunt of screams, coffins being left on our doorsteps, all of that. So.
But do you approve of those tactics, whether it's the Tea Partiers or whether it's the resistance?
People are making their own decisions because, as you know, in our country, civil disobedience is very much a part of our country. And, of course, if you go over the line, then you have to be held accountable. But people feel very strongly. That's what happens in our country. People felt very strongly about the Affordable Care Act back then.
Sure. Let me ask you about what Mitch McConnell had to say about all this.
They made a tactical mistake that really helped me unify my conference and turn on the Republican base going into the election. Maybe I ought to say thank you.
So was this a political mistake? You lost the confirmation battle. He's on the Supreme Court. And now all the indications are Republicans are more energized than they were 2 weeks ago.
Everything is political, starting from after President Obama got elected, and he said, my goal in life is to make sure that he's a one-term president, that there was not going to be a Supreme Court seat filled by with Merrick Garland. Everything with Mitch McConnell is political, and I have to say, he's very ruthless about it. Now, I had major concerns about Judge Kavanaugh, even before Dr.
You were against him before the hearing started.
Well, because I actually studied his cases, and I read his, particularly his dissents, which are very telling, very much against reproductive choice. So it doesn't matter to me, frankly. Yes, of course, it matters if they go over there and actually overturn Roe v. Wade, which I doubt they're going to do. But as Kellyanne said, the states are very busy passing all kinds of laws that would limit a woman's right to choose. Okay. It's those things that will go before a justice.
And you doubt they will overturn Roe v. Wade. Mazie Hirono,
even if they don't, they will nullify it pretty much.
Thank you for joining us on this.